I just broke up laughing in the middle of recording a video thanks to some funny comments in the live stream. So kudos to you guys. I think that's the first time that's ever happened. Good for you. I should break up laughing in the middle of my own videos more often. That's great. Look, I was making a video here. I had some thoughts while I was out walking just now. I never really had thought before about the contrast between vegetarianism and veganism in my own life in the way I'm about to discuss. Earlier today, I was watching a video. Somebody in the live stream correctly guessed it was a video from Saoirse Morava, who said hi to me on Twitter earlier today, so I went and looked at her video. She had a video where she was criticizing someone who has been vegetarian for 6 years, someone who is an ethical vegetarian for ethical reasons, saying, look, if you're an ethical vegetarian, it doesn't make sense unless it's a transition to veganism, which of course I completely agree with. If you are a vegetarian for ethical reasons or ecological reasons, or both, inevitably, you have to make a transition to being vegan, or it doesn't make sense. It makes sense only as a transitional ethos. Completely agree with Saoirse's point. It led me to think for a moment, however, about how vegetarianism in my own subjective experience was different from veganism. And for me, part of the difference is the time of my life. I got older, I got more mature, and I certainly did develop a more tolerant and cooperative set of attitudes towards politics, as opposed to, like many people, maybe in my youth, I was a bit more revolutionary in my aspirations. I still do think that veganism is something that tries to change the world. It has a horizon of wanting to, abolish the meat and dairy industry, abolish the slaughterhouses, fundamentally change the way humans and animals live together in the future. But I do not think it's a revolutionary movement. And I think it's quite misleading to think of it or represent it as if it's a violent or revolutionary movement. However, it's a pretty fundamental challenge to society. I would say that growing up, my ideas about vegetarianism were influenced in a subtle and pervasive way. For one thing, because I grew up in an immigrant society. I grew up in Toronto. In Toronto, Canada, it is incredibly rare to meet Indigenous people, First Nations people, the Cree, the Ojibwe, the Mohawks, the Iroquois. I've met a few in Toronto, but it's very, very rare. And on the contrary, you meet vegetarians from China, from India, etc., etc. My father was involved with and influenced by Hinduism at an early age. At one stage of my father's university career, he actually wanted to learn Sanskrit and study Hindu philosophy and this kind of thing. Way back in the 1950s. My father is 100 years old. But, as you say, this is long before, in the late 1960s, there was a much more popular Western reaction to Hinduism and American culture and what have you. That had not happened yet. So my father got into that stuff when he was a young man. I do think that through my father's influence, and simply through the kind of influence of living in Toronto, I do think that I saw vegetarianism as a personal commitment to an ethical ideal that isolated you from society and put you in the position of maintaining your own moral purity despite the meat-eating society around you, a refusal to assimilate into a meat-eating society, but not as an attempt to transform that society. So, for example, a Brahmin, a Hindu Brahmin, who becomes an immigrant, who migrates from India to England or Canada or the United States, is stereotypically someone who's going to try to maintain their own purity, maintain their own religious tradition, or maintain a vegetarian diet for themselves and their family, but they're not trying to transform British society or Canadian society to resemble a Hindu Brahmin society. They're not trying to turn everyone to Brahmins. And there are many reasons for that, including the fact that, Hinduism is an exclusive religious community. They're not trying to encourage people to convert into the religion. And especially the upper castes, like Brahmins, they're even more exclusive. So, it's an exclusive club and you can't just join, nor are they trying to convert the whole world to join. Unlike, say, Christianity. Many Christians do want the whole world to become Christian. So, for me, subjectively, what I was reflecting on is that the transformative aspirations of veganism, wanting to transform the whole society, the abolitionist aspirations of wanting to abolish the meat and dairy industry, that is something very different from just the way I personally perceived vegetarianism before I became vegan. And the unexplained factor here, I don't think I have to get into this video, is just that definitely I was younger and when I was younger and I was vegetarian, I think it's true that I both flirted more with a revolutionary aesthetic in terms of my thoughts, in terms of feeling like a political dissident in Canadian society. But it's also true that I also felt more powerless. And the kind of experiences I've talked about on this channel ad nauseum, I've said so many times, going to City Hall and really being involved in and understanding political processes, whether it's in a boardroom or, at Parliament. The understanding I developed of both economics and procedural aspects of politics and justice and as time went on, that both led me to have a more conciliatory, cooperative, and tolerant set of attitudes towards politics. But it also led me to have a very down-to-earth faith that we can make a difference. In the same way that Mothers Against Drunk Driving can change the laws against drunk driving, can change the culture of how people drink alcohol and how people take taxis and all these other things. In the same way that, the status of homosexuals has changed without a revolution. There never was a gay revolution, but there was a, complex community-based, political movement that did change Western civilization in many fundamental ways, change the laws, change the culture from root to branch. That in the same way, veganism can advance, can make progress. I mean, I just say ultimately, dare I use the word empowering or empowerment? As I've gotten older, it's true that my aspirations became less revolutionary. My form of dissent, became more refined or even more conformist, you could say. But pair with that is a real sense of the power that common people have. If 5 or 10 people can get together and everyone throws $5 into a hat and cooperates and gets organized, that I do see in the modern Western world how porous the establishment is. And probably when I was younger, I saw the establishment as something all powerful and myself as powerless, and felt that me and people like me in my generation could never influence political outcomes or social change in any way, and that, of course, lends to a more rambunctious set of anti-establishment sentiments. That's it, people. So obviously a completely idiosyncratic, completely subjective set of reflections on how, for me, vegetarianism was a very different ideology than veganism. But even back when I was vegetarian, I could remember being so excited to meet someone else who happened to be vegetarian, an ethical vegetarian, and really wanting to make friends with them, really, feeling we had something profoundly important in common. Especially out here, I can remember when I was only vegetarian and living in Asia, and you meet someone else and think, we got to build it. And almost never did the other people feel that way. The other people just thought they were vegetarian. It was no big deal. So nice to now have a circle of friends, thanks to YouTube, thanks to the wonders of the internet, who take veganism seriously the same way I do and see the same more remote horizon of proceeding towards some kind of meaningful social change.